Beach House Mystery Update. You guys have been begging me for updates on old stories, and honestly, most people ghost me after sending their initial submission, but not this time. Remember that absolutely insane beach house robbery from last July? The one with the 4 figures swimming across the lagoon in the dead of night? Well, the person who sent that story just dropped an update in my inbox, and it's somehow even more disturbing than the original. Before we dive into what happened recently, I'm gonna give you a quick refresh on the original story, but if you already know it, skip ahead to the timestamp on screen because this update is wild. Trust me, you're not ready for where this goes. So our storyteller used to love the beach as a kid. Summers were all about those weekends at the shore, especially when he could crash at his friend Charles's beach house in Long Beach Island, New Jersey. Classic teenager setup, right? This particular summer he was 16. Him, Charles, and their buddy Riley, who had just gotten his license, were heading down to LBI for an unsupervised weekend. And look, if you've ever been a teenager with a beach house and no parents around, you know exactly where this is headed. They load up Riley's car, and the drive down is chaotic in the best way possible. Riley's barely mastered driving at this point, so they're just laughing at him swerving around and cursing out the road. Peak teenage energy. When they get to the house, the layout is actually super important here. There's a front door, a garage door connecting the front and backyards, a sliding glass door in the back, and this is key, an upstairs deck with a spiral staircase that goes straight down to the ground. So basically, you can enter and exit from the second floor. The house sits right along a lagoon, so the back faces this narrow channel of water with houses on the opposite side. Now these guys are at that age where chasing girls is priority number 1, and having a beach house to themselves is like hitting the jackpot. They spend a few hours scrolling through Snapchat trying to figure out which girls are down the shore, and eventually they find 3 who are down to come hang out: Rosie, Alexa, and Sophie. They've got weed, they snagged some alcohol from their parents, everything's perfect. The girls show up and they're vibing. Eventually all 6 of them end up in the heated pool in the backyard, smoking and just living their best teenage lives. The vibe is immaculate. Warm water, bay breeze, music playing. These kids are in paradise. But then everything changes. Charles suddenly turns the music all the way down and just stares over their shoulders into the darkness of the lagoon. Everyone's confused. One of the girls asks why he turned the music down, and Charles whispers that he saw someone standing on the dock across from them. Our storyteller thinks Charles is just messing around. He's like, who cares, bro? People literally live there. But Charles shakes his head and says he knows that family personally. His parents told him they're in Florida for the week. The house is supposed to be empty. Honestly, our guy still thinks it's not a big deal, but the girls are getting freaked out and want to go inside. So all 6 of them start climbing out of the pool. They're drying off in the yard when Riley suddenly jumps and curses, looking toward the lagoon. Everyone turns to look, and even though the light is super dim, they can definitely see movement coming from the opposite dock. They all freeze, trying to get a better look. Then a car passes on the road across from them, and for just a second, it lights up the scene. And what they see is absolutely horrifying. For tall silhouettes standing at the edge of the dock, just facing their direction, they can't make out any features, what they're wearing, nothing. Just these 4 figures staring at them across the water. Charles says in this shaky voice, "Go inside now." As they're rushing toward the sliding door, they hear it. For consecutive splashes, those people just jumped into the water and are swimming across the lagoon toward them, full panic mode. The girls are screaming. Riley slams the sliding door shut and locks it. Charles runs to lock the front door. All 6 of them sprint to a room that's not visible from outside and just wait in terrified silence. A few minutes pass. Nothing. Then Riley realizes he forgot something crucial. The sliding door on the upstairs deck. It's still unlocked. Charles starts freaking out because he knows his house is about to be broken into, and then they hear it. Soft, quiet footsteps above them on the second floor. That's it. They're done. None of them have weapons. They're all drunk and high, so running is literally their only option. All 6 of them bolt for the front door, jump in the car, and Riley floors it. He's so panicked he destroys Charles's mailbox, backing out of the driveway. Once they're far enough away, they call the police. They eventually go back once the cops have searched the place, but the news is devastating. All the valuables on the top floor are gone, but that's not even the worst part. Charles's family owned a medium-sized Boston Whaler boat, and that's missing too. The thieves used it as their getaway vehicle. Here's what makes it even creepier. Charles's dad kept a spare key hidden in a small hatch below the steering wheel. That's how the robbers got away so quickly. But how did they know where that key was hidden? The police never caught anyone, never found the boat, nothing. Charles, Riley, and our storyteller are convinced that whoever robbed the house had to be someone who knew the family, someone who knew where the key was, who knew the house was supposed to be empty that weekend, and that's where the story ended, until now. So our storyteller never thought he'd be revisiting this again. He and Charles fell out of touch after going to separate colleges and moving to different cities. Years passed without any updates about the robbery or the stolen boat, but recently he attended his high school reunion. He wasn't even planning on going, but his girlfriend convinced him it might be fun. He shows up and immediately spots Charles talking to Riley and some other guys from their old friend group. It's one of those surreal moments where everyone looks exactly the same but completely different at the same time. As the night goes on, people break off into smaller groups. Charles pulls him and Riley aside and asks if they want to grab drinks after the reunion wraps up. Riley can't make it because he has an early flight, but our guy is definitely in. So they end up at this dive bar just reminiscing over beers. Somehow that night at the beach, house comes up in conversation, and as soon as it does, Charles slaps the table like he just remembered something huge. He starts explaining that his little brother Kieran is 19 now, and apparently he and his friends are way bigger troublemakers than Charles and his friends ever were. About a year ago, Kieran and two of his buddies decided to take the family's new boat out without permission. This was the replacement boat they got after the insurance payout from the stolen one. Their plan: take it out for a late afternoon trip with a bunch of beer, which is obviously incredibly stupid and dangerous, not to mention illegal since they're all underage. But it gets worse. They decided to anchor near this place called Carl Island, which is technically part of a wildlife refuge where you're not supposed to be at night. Their genius plan was to anchor the boat, kill the beers, then swim to shore and hang out on the island to watch the stars or whatever. So they swim to the beach and find a nice spot. They're just sitting there waiting for the sun to go down when one of Kieran's friends notices another boat anchored further down the shore. Kieran takes a closer look at this boat and becomes absolutely convinced it looks exactly like their family's old Boston whaler, the one that got stolen all those years ago. Now keep in mind, the boat is pretty far away and it's getting dark, so Charles had a hard time believing his brother could actually be sure about this. But according to Charles, Kieran wouldn't even entertain the possibility that this was just some random boat. So Kieran convinces his friends to swim out and get a better look, and they do. They swim all the way out there, and by the time they reach it, Kieran is 100% convinced that it's his family's old boat. Here's where it gets frustrating though. Kieran wanted to take pictures to show his parents, but obviously they didn't bring their phones when they swam over, and by the time they would have swum back to get them, it would have been too dark to see anything clearly. One of his friends suggested calling the police, but Kieran and his other friend were terrified of getting in trouble. They'd been drinking, they took the boat without permission, and they were pretty sure they weren't even supposed to be at that island in the first place. Calling the cops was basically the last thing Kieran wanted to do. Instead, they decided to swim back to their boat, drive it over to the other boat for pictures, then figure out what to do once they got home. They swam back to shore to cut down on the swim distance, and as they were walking down the beach, one of Kieran's friends turned around and noticed a man walking toward them. Charles said that Kieran was positive the man picked up speed as soon as they turned around, like he was actively pursuing them. And here's the scariest part. This person appeared to be holding a shovel. The boys ran, and the guys started running after them. They sprinted as fast as they could back to their boat. Kieran looked back one more time and saw that the guy was now running in the opposite direction, presumably back to his boat, which was significantly closer. The boys reached their boat and started leaving. But here's the thing, when you're operating a boat after sunset in New Jersey, there are all these regulations about speed limits and what lights you need to have on. So it wasn't like they could just gun it out of there. They had to follow the speed limits, which made the whole thing even more nerve-wracking. Charles said that Kieran described the ride back as the most tense thing he's ever experienced. Just knowing someone could be following you in the dark without being able to speed away. Kieran said he wasn't sure whether they were actually followed or not, but he could have sworn he heard the faint sounds of a boat somewhere in the darkness behind them. Once they made it back home, Kieran's friends again pushed him to call the police, but he still refused. He was more scared of his parents finding out what they'd done than he was of whatever they saw on that island. The guilt ate him alive though, and he came clean to his parents the next day. Well, about everything except the drinking, which Charles only found out about later. Charles said his parents were more furious at Kieran than he'd ever seen them. His dad banned Kieran from using the house for the rest of the summer, among many other punishments. His parents ended up reporting what Kieran saw to the authorities, but Charles said nothing ever came of it. Just like with the original incident, the police were completely useless. At that point, our storyteller had to interrupt Charles with some obvious questions, like how could the boat still be in use around LBI all these years later without anyone recognizing it? And why would someone anchor it so close to shore if it was really stolen? And what about that guy with the shovel? Did the police ever search the island for whatever he was doing? Charles admitted he didn't have solid answers. His best guess about the boat was that whoever stole it might have stripped it or repainted it enough to avoid suspicion. It's not like every boat owner in the area has registration numbers memorized. As for why they'd anchor so close to shore, maybe they felt comfortable because it was a restricted area where most people wouldn't normally go. But the biggest question was about the guy with the shovel. Charles just shrugged and said maybe he was burying something or digging something up. Either way, it spooked Kieran and his friends enough that they ultimately confessed to something Kieran would normally never tell his parents about, and that was pretty much it. They talked for a little while longer and then said their goodbyes. So what do we make of all this? Because honestly, this update raises way more questions than it answers. If that really was the stolen boat, what has it been used for all these years? Why risk keeping it in the same general area where it was stolen? And what was that guy doing on a restricted island at night with a shovel? The possibilities are pretty dark when you think about it. Was he burying something? Digging something up? And if so, what? The fact that he chased after 3 teenagers suggests he really didn't want to be seen. Let me know what you think happened in the comments. Do you think it was really the stolen boat? What do you think that guy was doing on the island? This whole thing is wild.